My husband abandoned our family for a stranger he never met. Now he wants us back for his inheritance. But I took everything and walked away. I, 40-year-old female, have been feeling torn about a recent decision I made involving my family, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. My world turned upside down 8 years ago when my husband, Robert, suddenly told me he was leaving me and the kids. He said he had met a stunning woman online and fallen in love. His announcement came completely out of the blue and left me heartbroken. For weeks leading up to it, Robert had been acting distant and odd, but I had assumed it was just stress from work. We had been married for over 10 years and had stood by each other through everything. I had known him half my life. We had built a family together, and the idea of him cheating had never crossed my mind. One evening, Robert finally admitted that he had met someone. Hearing those words shattered me. He said her name was Isabella and claimed she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. They'd been talking for the past 3 months and had developed a connection that made him realize he was unhappy in our marriage. Every word felt like a dagger, leaving me feeling angry, confused, and broken inside. He kept saying he still loved us, but couldn't ignore his feelings for Isabella. He insisted he had to meet her in person to see if there was a real future with her. I was caught in a storm of emotions, unable to process what was happening. It felt like the walls around me were closing in. My voice trembled as I asked if he was really leaving us, me and the kids, for this woman. He nodded slowly, saying he didn't expect me to understand, but that he had to do this for himself. He claimed he had thought long and hard and had decided to meet her and start a new life. He promised to support us financially as best as he could, but said he had to follow his heart and meet the love of his life. It felt like the ground had crumbled beneath me. I couldn't believe the man I had shared my life with was leaving me and our children for someone he had never even met in real life. My first instinct was to scream, beg, do anything to make him stay. But when I looked at his face, I knew he had already made up his mind. There was no turning back. Robert moved out the next week, leaving me to explain to our kids that their father wasn't coming back. Emily, who was 9 at the time, had a million questions I couldn't answer. Nathan, only 4 then, couldn't fully understand what was going on. He just held on to me tightly, sensing that something was terribly wrong. I felt empty, crushed. The only thing that kept me going was my kids. When I told my family what had happened, their reactions mirrored mine, confused and heartbroken. They couldn't wrap their heads around why my husband would just abandon us like that. My parents wanted me to take legal action, but at that point, I was still holding on to a shred of hope that he might come back. Robert's parents were just as devastated. They called him several times, begging him to return, but he told them the same story he told me. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I was left to pick up the broken pieces for the sake of myself and my children. Family and friends gathered around us, offering support and helping hands. I focused on finding a job to create a stable home for Emily and Nathan, though the pain of Robert's betrayal never truly went away. During that difficult time, Robert's parents were incredibly supportive. They helped financially and watched the kids when I needed rest. It's now been 8 years, and Robert's presence in our lives has faded to almost nothing. He used to send money now and then, but otherwise, there was no contact, not with me and not with the children. I've basically become a single mother, working day and night to care for my kids and give them the love and life they deserve. Emily remembered her father more clearly, and for a while she tried to stay in touch. But eventually she stopped and learned not to bring him up anymore. Nathan's memories, though, are much hazier. He never mentioned his father at all. Yet despite that loss, both kids grew into incredible individuals, carrying strength through their pain. Recently, Robert's father passed away unexpectedly, and we all attended the funeral. Not long after, his family's lawyer reached out, saying he needed to speak with me about the will. He explained that Robert's father had left some money for his grandchildren. While it wasn't a massive amount, it was enough to help with college costs. I sat down with Emily and Nathan to share the news. They wouldn't have to worry about paying for college anymore. Their faces lit up with joy, and seeing their happiness was genuinely heartwarming. It felt like a heavy burden had finally been lifted, and for once, it seemed like life was starting to come together again after years of uncertainty. Then, just last week, I got a call from an unknown number. To my shock, it was Robert. A wave of emotions crashed over me, and I was stunned to hear his voice after 8 long years. He paused for a moment, then said he urgently needed to see me. Confused, I asked him to explain. He said he had an offer to discuss and kept pleading with me to meet in person. I couldn't understand why he was reaching out now, after all these years of silence. Still, his repeated requests were hard to ignore. I took a deep breath and, after thinking it over, cautiously agreed to meet him. We arranged to meet at a cafe near my office. When I hung up, my mind was flooded with questions, doubts, and emotions I had buried for years. I chose not to tell the kids anything until I knew what Robert wanted. In the days leading up to the meeting, I was an emotional wreck. I kept replaying everything: his sudden departure, the heartbreak, the lonely nights, the years of raising our children on my own. The pain felt fresh all over again. On the day of our meeting, I arrived early and nervously sipped my coffee while waiting. It wasn't long before Robert walked in. He looked older, worn down. He didn't look like the man I had once married. There was hesitation and sadness in his expression as he approached. Our initial conversation was awkward, full of small talk and tentative words. We avoided the obvious, focusing instead on polite greetings and vague updates. It was like we were two strangers trying to navigate the ruins of a life we had once shared. Eventually, Robert mustered the courage to explain why he had reached out. He began telling me that Isabella wasn't the person he had believed she was. Apparently, she was a single mother, but had hidden that from him until he showed up at her door. Their relationship had been full of struggles, mainly due to her gambling addiction, which eventually drained all of his savings. They fought constantly, but Robert had stayed, too afraid to walk away from someone again. However, after his father's recent passing, he realized life was too short to stay in misery. He said he missed us all deeply and had spent years regretting the choices he made. Robert admitted that he had thought about coming back many times over the years, but he didn't have the courage to face us. Then, he revealed that his father had left him the lake house, a massive property we used to visit for vacations, back before everything fell apart. He told me he planned to sell the house, which would leave him financially secure for the rest of his life. I sat quietly, listening. Then came the real reason for his return. Robert said he wanted to come back, to us. He wanted to give our children a luxurious life, promising that I would never have to work again if I took him back. I stared at him in disbelief as he painted a picture of a future free from financial stress. He said we could live comfortably, rebuild what we once had, and give our family a second chance, all thanks to the inheritance. I weighed his words carefully. The thought of financial security for my children was tempting. It could solve so many of our problems, but I couldn't forget the years I spent alone, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the birthdays and holidays he missed, the emotional toll his absence had taken on all of us. As tempting as his offer was, I couldn't ignore the emotional scars his actions had carved into me. So I looked him in the eyes and firmly told him that, while I appreciated the offer, I simply couldn't forget the last 8 years. I reminded him that I'd been raising our kids alone, juggling work, parenting, and all the responsibilities he walked away from. We may not have everything, but we have a stable life now. I told him I couldn't risk putting myself or my children through more heartache. I had to protect them, and truthfully, I wasn't sure I could ever trust him not to disappear again. Robert kept pleading with me to reconsider, his eyes full of desperation. But I knew that letting him back in would be a massive risk to the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. My heart ached at the idea of turning down the financial security his offer promised. Still, I couldn't ignore the emotional damage his abandonment had caused. Since that meeting, my parents have been urging me to reconsider. They believe that after everything he put us through, the very least Robert can do now is give his children a better life, one free from financial struggles. They keep telling me that people can change, that maybe he truly regrets his past and wants to make things right. They think I'm being selfish and say I should prioritize my children's comfort over my personal heartbreak. I've spent countless nights lying awake, second-guessing my decision. I haven't even been able to bring myself to tell the kids about Robert's return. I'm terrified of how they'll react, how they'll process the idea of their father coming back after 8 years of silence. I keep questioning my own judgment, torn between the potential benefits of saying yes and the pain of the past. So Reddit, am I the one in the wrong for rejecting Robert's offer and possibly keeping my children from a better life? Taking in all the advice, I realized it was finally time to have an honest conversation with my children about Robert. The last thing I wanted was for him to reappear in their lives without warning, catching them off guard. Earlier today, after dinner, I sat down with Emily and Nathan to talk. I gently explained that their father had suddenly resurfaced and made an offer to return to our lives. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity and confusion as they tried to process what I was saying. When I told them about the lake house he had inherited and how he wanted to sell it to support us, their reactions were very different. Emily, now 17, went through a wave of emotions: shock, frustration, even anger. She was confused about why Robert wanted to come back now after so many years. Though she remembered her father and admitted she had missed him at times, she also remembered how painful his absence had been. She said she had once longed for a father figure, but had learned to live without one, and now she didn't want him back in her life. Nathan, who is 12 now, said he didn't remember Robert at all, so he wasn't too affected by my decision to reject the offer. He didn't fully grasp the emotional weight of the situation, but made it clear that he was happy with how things were. I told them both that I would honor whatever they felt and that their opinions mattered most. Emily made it clear she didn't want to see him, and Nathan agreed. That moment made everything so much clearer for me. As tempting as it was to try and fix our family, I realized those old wounds still ran deep, and my children's well-being had to come first. I knew then, with complete certainty, that I made the right decision when I walked away from Robert at that cafe. After that, I decided to talk to my parents about what comes next. Contrary to what many people assumed, I never intended to stay married to Robert. He left before we could even begin divorce proceedings, and at the time, I didn't have the means to fight it. But now, I've finally accepted that there's no reason to remain legally tied to this man any longer. I even began to worry that he might show up at my job or, worse, try to see the kids at school without warning. That's when I decided it was time to reach out to his mother. She was aware that he had returned, and at this point, she seemed like the only person who might help me understand his motives and help me deal with his relentless pursuit. I met with her to inform her of my decision to end things with Robert legally and to express how overwhelmed I felt by his constant calls. During that conversation, she revealed the real reason behind his persistence. She explained that Robert's father had placed a cleverly worded clause in the will concerning the lake house. Robert would only inherit the property if he returned to our family and re-established a relationship with us. And to solidify his claim, I would also need to sign paperwork confirming our reconciliation. I was stunned and heartbroken. Everything suddenly made sense. His sudden interest, the calls, the emotional pleas. It wasn't about making amends or fixing our family. It was about securing his inheritance. The entire situation felt like a cruel emotional trap. I needed to think clearly and protect myself and my kids. I realized I couldn't remain tethered to someone whose intentions were wrapped in manipulation and deceit. I've started looking for a lawyer to begin divorce proceedings immediately. I also spoke with my parents, who now deeply regret encouraging me to reconsider. They finally saw Robert for who he truly was and completely supported my decision to move on. They apologized for ever urging me to hear him out. For now, I've blocked Robert's number so he can't contact me. The next time he hears from me will be when he's served divorce papers. They had questions and wanted closure, and I felt it was important they get the answers they needed. Despite all the pain, I agreed. We arranged to meet at a local park, a neutral place filled with memories from when we were still a family. Emily approached with a mix of skepticism and curiosity in her eyes. Nathan stayed close to my side, unsure of how to feel. I began by calmly telling Robert that I knew the real reason he had come back. I confronted him about the clause in his father's will and how it was the driving force behind his sudden reappearance. Robert tried to deny it, insisting that it wasn't just about the inheritance and that he truly wanted a second chance with us. I shook my head. I told him I didn't believe him and that we were done. Still, I asked him to give our kids the courtesy of closure, to answer the questions they had. He nodded solemnly. Emily was the first to speak. She asked him directly if leaving us for another woman had been worth it. Robert looked down, shame written all over his face, and admitted that he had made a terrible mistake, that he'd been lost and confused. Nathan, blunt and honest, asked if his father's happiness was more important than the family he'd abandoned. Robert sighed deeply, admitting he hadn't been thinking clearly, and that leaving us was the worst decision he'd ever made. My kids, smart, strong, and perceptive, weren't satisfied with just a few sorry explanations. Robert tried to blame his actions on a midlife crisis, sharing stories about the reality of life with Isabella, her gambling addiction, their constant fighting, and the illusion he had chased. Emily and Nathan listened carefully, but I could see they weren't convinced. They asked why he never stayed in touch. Did he even regret abandoning us? Their voices trembled with pain. Robert admitted that his guilt consumed him, that he didn't know how to face us. He claimed that now he wanted to make things right, and could offer us a life of comfort and luxury. But when I looked into my children's eyes, I knew the truth. They didn't believe him, just like I didn't. Money couldn't heal the years of pain. This wasn't just about comfort. It was about principle. It was about the strength and resilience the three of us had built in his absence. So I stood tall and told him we didn't need him anymore. Not his presence, and not his money. We had moved on. I handed him the divorce papers as he sat stunned, holding them with a mixture of regret and disappointment. He started pleading, telling me again that he truly wanted to fix things. Blame someone, then she should blame herself and her gambling addiction. I sent her a message making that clear, then blocked her. Hopefully, she won't attempt to reach out again. I refuse to let her disrupt the peaceful life my children and I have worked so hard to build. As for Robert's mother, I still speak to her from time to time. She has always been kind and supportive. She expressed genuine regret about how everything turned out and told me to do whatever I need to in order to find happiness again. Interestingly, she also revealed something unexpected. Because I chose not to reconcile with Robert, the lake house will no longer go to him, as his father had originally intended. That clause in the will was airtight. Without my consent, the inheritance is forfeited. Hearing this was both surprising and, in a way, poetic. Robert's selfish decisions hadn't just destroyed our family, they had ruined someone else's life too. Perhaps it was only fair that he face the consequences now. It's time to move forward and let the past stay where it belongs. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but the healing has already begun. My children are growing into strong, resilient individuals, and each new day feels just a little brighter. We may have scars, but we also have hope, and that's enough to carry us forward.